This is a story of a car that some say is a genuine Australian car, more genuine than a Holden, Chrysler or a Ford. It was a car that in a brief shining moment was poised to change Australian automotive history forever. Launched in June 1973, it was the first homegrown family car to truly challenge the dominance of the Big Three. Despite being named Wheels Car of the Year for 1973, its ambitious goal was cut short by a perfect storm of corporate turmoil, bad timing and poor manufacturing. Dismissed as a lemon by some, this car is more accurately a tragic case of what if. Following the 1954 merger of Lord Austin and Lord Nuffield's Australian operations to form BMC, or British Motor Corporation Australia, the new company struggled to compete in the local market. BMC were using small, modified British cars, which failed to appeal to the Australian families who preferred the large, locally made 6-cylinder and V8 cars that dominated the market. Despite extensive modifications to their underpinnings to handle Australia's harsh conditions, the British models were still not entirely suited to the country, often lacking features like generous boot space. These were the likes of the Morris Marshall, a rebadged Austin A95 Westminster. A derivative of the Austin A90, was too small and underpowered despite having a straight six engine. The Austin Lancer and Morris Major, these were based on the Wolseley 1500 and Riley 1.5, which were themselves derivatives of the smaller Morris Minor platform. The Austin Freeway and Wolseley 2480, based on the Austin A60 Cambridge and Wolseley 1560. The Freeway was an attempt to create a larger car by stretching a smaller British design by an inch, and featured a unique Australian-built 2.4 litre 6-cylinder engine known as the Blue Streak, but its styling was a compromise. The Wolseley 2480 was the Freeway's more upscale twin. The BMC 1100, designed by Mini's own creator Alec Izigonis, was adapted for Australia with over 30 modifications, with its spacious design and innovative hydroelastic suspension helping it to win the 1964 Wheels Car of the Year award, a first for a British brand. The BMC 1100 was praised by motoring journalists. However, its small size and 4-cylinder engine ultimately proved to be a major hurdle for sales in a market that preferred larger, more powerful cars. For reference, hydroelastic suspension replaces the separate springs and dampers of a conventional suspension system with fluid-filled displacer units, which are interconnected between the front and rear wheels on each side of the vehicle, providing a smoother and more stable ride. Although some of BMC Australia's cars developed a small loyal following, they ultimately failed to challenge the market leaders like Ford and Holden. As a young man, David Hardy, who would later become a car designer for Leyland, developed a passion for drawing cars. His father, Graham Hardy, then chief body engineer at BMC Australia, asked him as a teenager to redesign the front of an Austin A60 Cambridge, a design that would go on to become the Austin Freeway. Wanting to become a true car designer, he began his career at BMC as an apprentice fitter and machinist, where he was mentored by the then head of the styling department, the rebellious and passionate Roland Rodberg. In January 1968, British Motor Holdings, BMH, and the Leyland Motor Corporation merged to create British Leyland. With a production capacity of 1 million cars per year, this merger sent a ripple effect across its global operations. The most significant of these was in Australia, where BMC Australia was absorbed into the newly established British Leyland Motor Corporation of Australia, becoming Leyland Australia. Then, in November 1968, the newly formed Leyland Australia established the Advanced Model Group, or AMG. Their goal was simple: create a made in Australia car, free from British design influence, to directly compete with the Falcon, Valiant and Kingswood. Their original plan was to build two models, a medium sedan, Model A, and a large family car, Model B. However, their British parent company prioritised developing the Morris Marina as a Morris 1100's replacement, forcing Leyland Australia to adopt it instead of Model A. This would prove to be a critical mistake, as the resulting car would be ill-suited for local conditions. After Model A was scrapped, Model B, codenamed YDO-26 was given the green light in early 1969. Leyland Australia's Director of Engineering, David Beach, secured a modest budget of just 21 million Australian dollars. With it, he had to both design a new car from scratch and refurbish the Zetland production plant, a challenging task, especially when compared to the 33 million Australian dollars Chrysler spent on developing the Hemi 6 engine alone. The codename YDO-26 was the internal codename for what would become the Leyland P76 sedan, along with the YDO-27 station wagon and YDO-28 Force 7 coupe, but more of these two later. The Leyland P76 was named after its development codename, Project 76, while Leyland's official statement claimed the name stood for Project 1976, although legend has it that Lord Stokes chose P76 by using the first three digits of his army service number. Work on the P76 began in March 1969 on a tight budget and a 3-year timeline, although this would eventually slip. An early prototype for the car was a front-wheel drive model based on the Austin 1800, but powered by the Rover V8 engine. This version was ultimately abandoned as it was considered mechanically too complex and its handling was too poor. Following this experiment, Leyland set out to create a rear-wheel drive car, which would be a significant departure from their usual front-wheel drive models. The car was then developed in a joint operation between Australia and the UK, with an engineering prototype later spotted on the Myra test track at Nuneaton. However, in Australia, to overcome their lack of a private proving ground for the new YDO-26 or P76, the AMG engineering team purchased and modified 3 HK Holden cars, a Kingswood sedan, a V8 Monaro coupe and a Kingswood wagon. They fitted these with P76 components including a 3.5 litre Rover V8 engine, McPherson strut suspension, power steering and Borg-Warner automatic transmissions. This disguise was so effective that they bought 4 more to continue their technical testing. A key feature of this car was its highly successful lightweight Rover V8 engine, which was derived from an earlier Buick small block V8. With its aluminium construction, this V8 was nearly 200 pounds lighter than the cast iron V8s used by its rivals from the Big Three. This significant weight reduction was intended to improve both fuel economy and tyre wear. Despite common belief, the Leyland P76 styling was not created by Giovanni Michelotti. The car was in fact the brainchild of Leyland Australia's own chief stylist, Roman Rodberg, although Leyland also commissioned concepts from its own Longbridge studios in Italy's Ital Design. Rodberg submitted his own designs without being asked. After his initial submissions were rejected, Rodberg revised his design while on holiday, creating 2 proposals. One of these, a distinct wedge-shaped design, was unexpectedly chosen by British Leyland's head, Lord Stokes, over proposals from the top European design houses. However, management sought a prestigious name to finalise the look, and after talks with Giorgetto Giugiaro failed, they hired Giovanni Michelotti, who went on to make minor revisions and received the credit for this design. However, Leyland Australia's engineering director, David Beach, also later made some minor adjustments to both the front and rear design. According to a story from David Hardy, a suspected act of sabotage occurred the day before Rodberg's final model was to be photographed at the studio, when its paint had mysteriously peeled off, which Rodberg believed was a deliberate act by Michelotti's team. In June 1969, Leyland Australia launched the Morris Nomad, a hatchback based on the Morris 1100. Despite its innovative design, the car failed due to several key issues. It lacked a traditional sedan option, its price was considered too high, and its build quality was questionable. With only around 14,000 units sold before production ceased in late 1972, the car's failure highlighted the company's lack of a clear strategic direction. 1970, and enter the Land Crab, or Austin X6 or Cross 6. This was a full redesign of the British Austin 1800 with a 6-cylinder engine and named the Tasman or Kimberley. Praised for their rigid bodies, the Tasman with its front bench seat had 6-seat capacity, while the upmarket Kimberley had front bucket seats and sat 5. Unfortunately, they were an unconventional choice in a market that preferred more traditional rear-wheel drive sedans, and production ended after just 2 years. The Austin X6 was nicknamed the Land Crab due to its unusually wide stance, which gave it a squat, road-hugging appearance reminiscent of a crab. This unique design was a direct result of its innovative front-wheel drive layout with a transverse-mounted engine. This nickname was also widely applied to its family of cars which used the same platform, including the Austin 2200, Morris 1800 and Morris 2200. In 1970, Leyland started a process of developing a new model to succeed the Marina, codenamed the P82. The problem was that Leyland's cars were all compromises, designed for the smaller roads and different driving conditions of the UK, and were no match for the larger, more robust Australian offerings from Ford, Chrysler and Holden. This repeated pattern of failure is exactly what made the P76 project so critical for their survival. Then in 1971, the first pre-production P76 was assembled at the MG factory in Abingdon, England, headed by Roy Brocklehurst. Early tests showed the car was incredibly strong. It featured side intrusion beams, which were 7.5 inches deep and much like Armco steel safety fencing, an Australian first and not required by law until 1976. Particular attention was paid to its structural rigidity, which was achieved by reducing a number of panels needed to build the car to a remarkably low 215, reportedly only 5 more than a Mini. In April 1972, the Marina was introduced, built from completely knocked-down kits sent from Cowley in England. This was the car that replaced the Model A. It was a disaster, poorly built and not modified to handle Australia's harsh conditions, repeating the failures of earlier models and yet again severely damaging the Leyland brand. Leyland also officially succeeded BMC in Australia in 1972 and was part of a broader corporate restructuring of the British-based parent company. This change marked the beginning of the Leyland name appearing on cars like the Mini and Marina, replacing the old Austin and Morris badges. The P76 was launched on the 26th of June 1973 after an extended 5-year development program which initially cost 21 million Australian dollars, but to keep the project afloat the company had to take out additional loans. The P76 was designed to be a game changer for Leyland, and to publicise its launch, a promotional comedy thriller called The Car Makers was produced inside the Zetland factory, blending elements of James Bond and the Pink Panther. Unfortunately, I couldn't find this film or any clips, but if someone has any access to it, it will be great to see. The P76 was a collaboration project between Leyland Australia and Rover in the UK, and sharing a very similar wheelbase, all-aluminium V8 engine and suspension to the upcoming Rover SD1. The car was famously designed with a massive trunk that could hold a 44-gallon drum, although getting that full drum back out again was another story, and with the distinctive Raymond Rodberg wedge shape, it soon earned the nickname the Wedge. When the Leyland P76 won Wheels Car of the Year in 1973, the award was given exclusively to the roomy, agile and relatively fuel-efficient 4.4-litre all-aluminium V8 version. Leyland, however, were a bit cheeky, capitalising on the victory by advertising the entire P76 range as Car of the Year. This promotional tactic led to a change in the award rules, ensuring that the future winners would be judged on the entire model range, not just a specific variant. Then, in October 1973, the bad news started, as the fuel crisis was triggered when Arab members of OPEC imposed an oil embargo on nations that supported Israel during the Yom Kippur War. This action caused oil prices to nearly quadruple, leading to severe oil shortages, rising inflation and long queues at petrol stations. As a result, demand for large family cars like the P76 plummeted across the board, affecting all manufacturers. To make matters worse, a 3-month coal miner strike in the UK in November 1973 crippled British Leyland's finances, making any further support for its struggling Australian subsidiary nearly impossible. Another issue was the Australian automotive industry was a hotbed of labour disputes in the mid-70s, and as Leyland Australia was at the bottom of the supply chain, it was the first to suffer from component shortages and delays caused by strikes at parts manufacturers. The industrial turmoil made it impossible for the Zetland plant to maintain a consistent production schedule, compounding its financial losses and damaging Leyland's reputation even more. On top of this was the increase in Japanese imported cars diluting the market. Leyland initially commissioned the German company Carman to handle the body tooling, but when they couldn't meet the deadline, the job was given to Leyland's own pressed steel Fisher. This proved to be yet another critical mistake, as their substandard tooling and jigs led to major fitment problems. Doors didn't fit properly, A-pillars were misshapen, and the bonded windscreens, a first for a car this type, were often misaligned, causing leaks, cracks, and even popping out of speed. Additionally, interior components like the dashboard were never tested in a prototype and would warp in the sun. Faux wood fascias peeled off, and switches, shifters and window winders broke easily. The centre console rattled and the air conditioning compressor proved inadequate for the size of the cabin. Then there were the engines. The V8 spark plugs ran too cool, requiring a change at the first service. The six-cylinder was even worse, with frequently blown head gaskets on oil leaks. Combine all this with a workforce of largely non-English speaking migrant workers who required extensive retraining, and you got a cycle of chaos. Cars were being stockpiled while waiting for parts and then put back on the line for repairs, so causing even more significant delays. A former Leyland service manager, Ian Thomas, recalled the constant stream of disgruntled owners. Cars were filled with water after a simple rainstorm because seals were improperly fitted. Crucial parts were often left out by untrained workers, and the company's attitude was to fix the problems under warranty rather than stop the production line and fix them there. Because of these numerous issues, Leyland had to set up a rectification centre with 60 staff whose sole purpose was to fix the flaws in every single new car coming off the production line. Lord Stokes, British Leyland's chairman, had called the P76 their most exciting overseas project. He expressed hope that the car would revitalise the company's Australian subsidiary and improve its financial situation. But unfortunately, due to these numerous issues, the P76 was quickly labelled a lemon by the public. This, along with the low sales and Leyland's dire financial situation, would seal its fate. Now, let's take a look at the car. And as its marketing campaign stated, this car would definitely be anything but average. The P76 was available in three models: the Deluxe, the Super and the top of the line Executive. But more of these later. First, let's look at the specifics of the car. The P76 had two available engine options: the 2.6 litre or 160 cubic inch E6 straight six, and the 4.4 litre or 269 cubic inch all-aluminium V8. The 2.6 litre E6 being a larger version of the 2.2 litre engine used in the Kimberley, with a compression ratio of 9:1 using twin SU HS6 carburetors. It could push 121 horsepower. Based on period road tests and publications, the performance figures for the Leyland P76 with the 2.6 litre were 0 to 60 in 11.2 seconds, a top speed of 97 miles per hour and a quarter mile time of 18.5 seconds. The E-Series engines were an ambitious design with a single overhead camshaft and a compact layout. Its most unique feature was its Siamese cylinder bores, which allowed the engine to be much shorter than other six-cylinder engines, a key advantage for front-wheel drive applications. Siamese cylinder bores refer to an engine where the cylinders are cast side by side without any space between them for a cooling passage, such as a water jacket, and so can run a lot hotter. On the other hand, there was a 4.4 litre V8, an all-aluminium engine developed specifically for the Australian-built Leyland P76. It was a derivative of the ubiquitous Rover 3.5 litre V8, which itself was a licensed copy of the 1960s Buick 215 V8. The 4.4 litre V8 began life in 1961 as a Buick 215 or 3.5 litre V8. GM introduced it for their new line of compact cars, including the Buick Special and Oldsmobile F85. The engine was an engineering marvel for its time, with an incredible light weight of just 318 pounds. However, it was also expensive to produce and suffered from casting and sealing issues, so GM ceased its production in 1963. Then, in 1965, the Rover company, looking for a more powerful yet lightweight engine for its new saloon, purchased the rights to the tooling and the engine from GM. After a few years of refinement, in 1967, Rover began producing the 3.5 litre V8 engine, which became known as the Rover V8. This engine went on to power a huge range of iconic British vehicles, including the Rover P5B and P6, the Range Rover and various TVR and Morgans. In 1973, Leyland Australia's engineers took the successful Rover 3.5 litre V8 and modified it to create a unique 4.4 litre variant specifically for the P76. This new engine was designed to be more cost-effective and featured an 88.9mm square bore and stroke, meaning the bore and stroke had equal dimensions, along with pressed steel rocker covers and a single carburettor. The six-cylinder and V8 models weighed about the same, with the 4.4 litre P76 weighing just over 1,200 kilos, making it a very light car, which in comparison to the VJ Valiant having the same wheelbase weighed over 1,400 kilos. The 4.4 litre V8 had a compression ratio of 9:1, used a Stromberg WW2 barrel downdraft carburettor litre and produced 192 horsepower. In terms of performance, the 4.4 litre V8 was slower than the contemporary Ford Falcon, having a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of 7.9 seconds against the Falcon's 6.3 seconds, but it was slightly more fuel efficient, delivering 19.5 miles per gallon as compared to the Falcon's 14.5 miles per gallon. On the P76, both the 2.6 litre and 4.4 litre and had a Jaguar-esque front folding bonnet, with fuel being supplied by a 16.4 gallon petrol tank mounted behind the rear axle. Transmissions were all bought in from Borg-Warner, Australia, who also supplied Ford and Chrysler. The options were 3 or 4 speed manual and 3 speed automatic. The 3 speed was a heavy duty unit column shift that came standard on the Deluxe and was available with both the 6-cylinder and V8 engines, but had different ratios set up for each. The 4-speed was considered the performance-orientated option, using a floor shift and more commonly paired with a 6-cylinder engine, but also available on the V8s. Finally, the Borg-Warner 35 automatic was a highly reliable and widely used 3-speed automatic gearbox. It was the only automatic option for the P76 and was available in 2 different configurations, as a column shift, standard for the 6-cylinder models, and a floor shift, offered on V8 models with a T-bar handle shifter. An interesting addition was a stylised letter L that could be found on the gear selector cover plate. The rear axle assembly, also manufactured by Borg-Warner, used a Salisbury-type final drive. The final drive's gear ratio was determined by the engine choice. For the 6-cylinder, a Salisbury Model 78 was used, with a final drive ratio of 389 to 1. For the V8, a Salisbury Model 68 was used, with a final drive ratio of 292 to 1. This model also had the option of a limited slip differential, a configuration that would go on to be later used in the Rover SD1. All models used the same 111.24 inch or 2,826mm wheelbase, as this was considered the standard dimension for large Australian family cars at the time. This common chassis was a key part of the design philosophy to streamline production and maximise efficiency across different body styles. Stopping was by 10 3/4 inch or 273mm front ventilated disc brakes using a single piston sliding caliper. This ventilated design helped prevent heat build-up and brake fade, giving the P76 a significant advantage over its rivals. At the rear were 9 inch or 229mm drum brakes, with front disc brakes being standard across the range. The P76's braking system utilised a split circuit for the front and rear wheels and was also equipped with a pressure propulsioning valve in the rear circuit. This design provided a crucial safety backup by ensuring that if one of the hydraulic circuits failed, the other would still function. The pressure propulsioning valve prevented the rear wheels from locking up under heavy braking, ensuring more stable and controlled stopping. A mechanical handbrake was mounted next to the driver's seat, which operated on the rear wheels. The P76 featured an offset steering column with an energy-absorbing cylinder and a padded steering wheel hub, which drove through a rack and pinion steering with a 37-foot or 11.3 metre turning circle. The suspension at the front was made up of McPherson struts, coil springs, Armstrong telescopic shock absorbers, and an anti-roll bar. The rear had a 4-link suspension, also using coil springs and Armstrong telescopic shock absorbers. The Leyland P76 was fitted with 6x14 steel wheels as standard, which featured a 5-stud pattern. The tyre options were E78L by 14 cross-ply for the 6 cylinders, E78S by 14 cross-ply for the V8s, and 185SR by 14 for the executive models. The P76 also had 3 distinct wheel trims for its 3 models, each designed to reflect the car's position in the lineup. The entry-level Deluxe used a small simple hubcap that covered the centre of the steel wheel. The mid-range Super featured a larger full-sized hubcap that covered the entire wheel, giving it a more styled appearance. And the top-of-the-line executive came with a more elaborate full-sized wheel cover designed to mimic the look of a styled wheel. The front lighting also varied with the model. The Deluxe received twin 7-inch performance range headlights, while the Super and Executive got quad 5 3/4 inch performance range headlights. All models also received vertical marker lights. For identification, the engine type can be found on the boot lid, while the model designation and engine type again can be identified by its fender badging. There is also a badge on the glove box door which shows the model designation. All rocker panels were painted black, and a unique feature of the P76 was its recessed windscreen wipers. The P76 was available in 3 trim levels. The Deluxe was the entry-level model of the P76 range, similar to the Holden Belmont. The Deluxe came standard with the 2.6 litre 6-cylinder, with the 4.4 litre V8 as an option for an additional $180. The model's name and engine type were featured on the front fender badging, with the engine type on the boot lid. The model was also found on the glove box door, left-hand side. It was also identified by a simplified grille with single headlights. The interior of the Deluxe was basic, featuring a full-width vinyl-covered bench seat and rubber floor mats. The dashboard was simple with a silver-painted finish. It was equipped with a reverse 2-spoke steering wheel, but there was no power steering option. These cars can be found with any combination of options, including factory air conditioning for V8s only, but none were fitted with T-bar autos or full consoles and received minimal soundproofing. The door tops and inside pillars were not padded. The Deluxe was offered in all colours, but are extremely rare in metallic. Late build P76 Deluxe models were offered with an optional luxury pack that provided premium upgrades from the higher spec models. This package replaced the standard rubber floor mats with loop pole carpet and a bench seat with more comfortable bucket seats. It also included a radio and padded door trims, making the entry-level model feel more refined and appealing. A taxi version of the Deluxe was also built, and it was the only car to initially meet the government's newly released taxi standards. The government eventually altered the standards so that the rival cars could also qualify. The police also got in on the act, as a number of Deluxe models were used across Australia as police patrol vehicles. The Super was the mid-range model, a direct competitor to the upmarket family cars like the Holden Premier and Ford Fairmont, and achieved a much higher percentage of sales than its other rivals in the mid-range offerings. The model's name and engine type were featured on the front fender badging, while the engine type was also on the boot lid. The model name could also be found on the left-hand side of the glove box. This model was offered with a choice of a 2.6 litre 6-cylinder or a 4.4 litre V8 engine, again for an extra $180. Visually, the Super had a more premium look, sharing a quad headlight setup and chrome trim with a top-of-the-line executive model, and was available in a full range of P76 colours. The interior of the Super was more refined. It came standard with deep padded vinyl bucket seats, using a rib pattern and a rear centre folding armrest. The cabin was finished in loophole carpet with extensive wood grain trim on the dash, door trims and instrument cluster. The dashboard included a clock and volt gauge as standard, plus a reverse 2-spoke steering wheel, and featured additional soundproofing. It was available with either a 4-speed manual floor-mounted shifter or an automatic, either a column-mounted or T-bar floor-mounted shifter. The Super model featured slightly padded door tops and interior A-pillar areas. There was no power steering as standard, but it was now a factory option. The standard bucket seats had fixed backs, but reclining versions were available as an option at an extra cost of $35. The boot was painted black and finished with the same rubber matting as used in the Deluxe. Air conditioning was a late and rare option. The Executive was a top-of-the-line luxury sedan, a model that pioneered a new market niche in Australia. Leyland Australia strategically positioned it to compete above the likes of the short wheelbase Ford Fairmont, but below the more expensive long wheelbase Ford Fairlane. It was exclusively fitted with a 4.4 litre V8 engine and T-bar automatic transmission. It shared most of its body and chrome fittings with a Super. It had additional features like rubber bumper strips and a red-edged centre grille badge, where the Super had a black-edged grille badge. Funnily enough, the Deluxe's grille badge was left plain. The Executive could be identified by its 8 badging on the boot lid, standing for V8. The engine type was also featured on the front fender badging, where it was joined by the model's name, which was also placed on the left-hand side of the glove box. The Executive featured the most luxurious interior P76 models. It came standard with reclining, cloth-covered bucket seats, a front centre armrest with a stowage console and rear folding armrest. The seats were upholstered in a distinctive perforated honeycomb pattern cloth. The cabin was finished with colour-keyed cut pole carpet, a padded rear parcel shelf and recessed energy-absorbing sun visors. The dashboard and instrument fascia were fitted with wood grain trim. Padded doorways rail cappings were included, along with a range of premium features like a cigarette lighter and ashtray. Power steering was fitted as standard, as was the reverse 2-spoke steering wheel, but the sports wheel, which would be later used on the full 7V, was optional. It also included innovative luxury features such as individually controlled rear map lights, curb illuminating lights under the door armrests, and a door ajar warning light. Its soundproofing was nearly double that of the Super model, and the car came with a carpeted boot. The Executive model name would also go on to be adopted by other manufacturers manufacturers, including Holden and Mitsubishi. There were 17 available colours in the P76 range, and what an eye-catching range. There were even discussions about a very basic model called the P76 Standard Saloon, but this idea was never pursued. Of the 18,007 P76s sold, 10,800 were V8, while 7,207 were 6-cylinder models, which breaks down to 8,169 Deluxe, 7,462 Supers and 2,376 Executives. Despite its short run, the P76 sedan was a symbol of Leyland's audacious vision for Australia, but its story is far from over. In the next and final episode, I'll be taking a look at the turmoil that plagued British Leyland and reveal the other models, including a mysterious two-door coupe and a rugged station wagon that was supposed to join the P76 before the factory's lights went out forever. Plus, a model that celebrated a great win for Leyland. All this and more in the next episode, so catch up with you then.